Hello, today's lesson is going to be all about trapezoids. So a trapezoid, like I mentioned in the last section, it's quadrilateral, so it has four sides, and the two bases are always parallel to each other. The other sides are never going to be parallel to each other in a trapezoid. So we got one pair of parallel sides, and that is a trapezoid. Those parallel sides, again, are the two bases. So whenever I say a base angle, since every angle is touching a base in a trapezoid, every angle is considered a base angle. These blue sides are the sides that are not parallel, are called legs. So we got two bases that are parallel, two legs that are not parallel. When we have an isosceles trapezoid, so I've mentioned this before, but isosceles means we have two congruent sides. So as you can see, these two sides are congruent to each other. And just like a triangle, if these two sides are congruent, these two angles have to be congruent. So these two angles are only congruent in an isosceles trapezoid. These two angles will also be congruent to each other. So when we have any type of trapezoid, these two angles, so the angles that touch the two different bases, so like these two angles or these two angles, those are always supplementary in any trapezoid. These two angles always supplementary. In an isosceles trapezoid, these two are congruent, these two are congruent. So in example 1, PQRS is an isosceles trapezoid. So we got to find the measure of angle P, angle Q, and angle R. So they give us that angle S is 50 degrees. So since it's isosceles, we know that this angle and this angle are congruent. So the measure of angle R would have to be 50 degrees. And again, any type of trapezoid, even if it wasn't isosceles, these two angles are always supplementary. So if this is 50 degrees, what would angle P have to be in order for them to add up to 180? Well, we could just do 180 minus 50 to get 130. So the measure of angle P has to be 130 degrees. And since these two are touching the same base, those two angles have to be congruent since it's isosceles trapezoid. So the measure of angle Q would have to also be 130 degrees. So in example 2, the following figure is an isosceles trapezoid. So find the value of x and y. So it didn't ask us to find this, but if we had to find angle D, that would also be 115 because these two are congruent. And we know that these two are supplementary. So what number would we add to 115 to get 180? So 180 minus 115 is 65. So that means y has to equal 65 degrees. So then there's a couple ways I can do this. I know that these two are supplementary, but I know that these two are congruent. So if this is 65, this has to also be 65. So that means 8x minus 7 has to be equal to 65. So add 7 to both sides. So 8x is equal to 72 and divide by 8 on both sides. So x is equal to 9. So x equals 9 degrees. Actually, just 9. So again, anytime I'm going too fast, please remember to pause the video. All right, so moving on. So this is going to be a very important thing that a lot of you are going to have to practice multiple times to remember how to do this. So when we have a mid-segment of a trapezoid, that mid-segment length is always equal to the two bases added together divided by 2. So another way to write this would be MN equals AB plus CD, all divided by 2. So these two things say the same thing. If I multiplied both sides by 2, that would just get rid of that 2 though. And then I have 2 times MN. So the way I prefer to write this is like this, 2 MN or 2 times the midsegment, is equal to the two bases added together. So to me, there's no fractions in this one, so it just looks a lot nicer. It's a little bit easier to understand, at least for me. So if you prefer one of these other ways better, then do it that way. That's totally fine. So in example 3, we got to solve for x. So if you remember, whatever the midsegment is, so in this case the midsegment is x, I'm going to multiply that times 2, so 2 times x, and it's going to equal the two bases added together. So x minus 3 plus 2x minus 2. So I'm going to combine like terms on the right side. So x plus 2x is 3x. Negative 3 minus 2 is negative 5. So I'll subtract 2x on both sides. 2x minus 2x is 0. 3x minus 2x is x, or 1x. And then add 5 to both sides. And we get x is equal to 5. So since it's just asked to solve for x, we are done with that one. And now moving on to the next example. So again, if we know the midsegment, I can multiply that times 2. So 2 times 24 in this case, and that's going to equal the two bases added together. So 4x plus 5 is one base. The other base is 2x minus 5. 2 times 24 is 48, and then I'm going to combine like terms on the right side. So 4x and 2x is 6x. And I got a 5 minus 5 is 0. So divide both sides by 6, and I get x equals 8. And I'm done. So the rest of the notes talk about kites. So we are actually going to skip this for now. So that's going to end the notes today. So a little bit shorter than they could have been. So don't say I never did anything nice for you guys.